I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the death of a father of three who died after drinking a Moscow Mule prepared by his wife. Prosecutors say it wasn't a plain Moscow Mule and have charged her with murder. Here's the story. Eric and Kouri Richins seemed to be living the perfect little life. The attractive young couple had 3 young boys and were doing very well financially living in Utah. They traveled, had a beautiful home, and spent a lot of time with their boys. But beneath the exterior, something else was happening. Family members say Eric suspected his wife of trying to poison him, giving him food and drinks laced with poison. Eric got so suspicious that he changed his life insurance and his will to leave his money to his sister, who he trusted to take care of his kids. Now, prosecutors say Eric was right. He died in March of 2022, a victim of fentanyl poisoning. After his death, his wife, Kouri, wrote a book for her children to help them deal with the loss of their father. And just after the release of the book, Kouri was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Eric. The first time I heard this story and what was going on, it was about this book. And I was trying to figure out, wait, what is going on here? Take a look at the book. It's called Are You With Me? And this was a children's book that was written by Kouri Richins. And the dedication page of the book reads, "Dedicated to my amazing husband and a wonderful father." Dedicated to the man she's now charged with murdering. Let's take a look at an excerpt from this book. And this is the voice of the angel who would be the voice of the father who has passed away, speaking to his children. "Yes, I am with you as you walk the halls of the new school, making new friends, meeting new teachers. I will sit at your desk next to you, teaching you, pushing you to try harder, and giving you my love when you succeed." On its face, right, you look at that and you're like, okay, did anyone ever write a book like this before? To help children who are going through a terrible time. I mean, little boys losing their dad. That's horrible. Absolutely horrible. Their lives change forever. And all of this brings me to the first question of our investigation. Why did she write the book? Why did Kouri Richins take the time to write this book? What is going on here? Joining me, representing the family of the victim, Eric Richens, Greg Skordas is with us, and nationally known psychotherapist, host of Talking Live and the Bite Size podcast. She wrote a book on killer spouses. It's Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Welcome to you both. Greg, let me begin with you. What was the reaction at the time of the family of Eric Richens when they found out and they saw that Kouri had written this children's book?
Well, Vinnie, they were quite incredulous because that she was involved in the homicide, and that it was, of course, took almost a year for her to be charged. I mean, the irony in that is you can't even overstate. They felt that she was culpable. She was going to hurt him. In fact, she told people, if something happens to me, or if I'm hurt, please look at Kouri. Please look at her and her conduct. So the book was really just adding insult to injury for them, something that it was frankly just very difficult for them to even have to deal with.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, getting inside the mind. Now, she's pleaded not guilty. She is presumed innocent. Yet, I think she knew she was under suspicion at the time, for obvious reasons. Why do you think she wrote that book?
So my first thought is, what a great cover. If you are going to kill your husband, why not cover it up with a book about grief, kind of pretending to be this great wife, this appreciative wife this grieving wife, and somebody who wants to really mother their child in the right kind of way. And so I think it's that in part, and also Kouri's husband didn't want her to work, or that's what she experienced him as, somebody who wanted her to be a full-time mom. And she didn't want that. So I wonder if coming out with this book and being on television somehow helped her feel like she's the professional she always wanted to be or deserved to be.
You mentioned she was on television. Kouri Richins appeared on Good Things Utah to promote the release of this children's book. Let's take a look.
My husband passed away unexpectedly last year, so it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us, and he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And, you know, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year.
Dr. Robbie, what did you think of her appearance there on Good Things Utah?
She did a great job. I mean, she came off as a credible professional. One could imagine her being a grieving wife and wanting to be a good mother to her children. But I think it was really just all a cover of how she wanted to be seen and how she wanted to present to other people. And it was a way for her to make a name for herself as well. But it's a great cover. So if she is a sociopath and has antisocial personality disorder, this is really a perfect strategy for her to take.
Greg Skordas, let me ask you, you write a book, you go promote the book, you're probably trying to sell the book. Do you think she was motivated at all by money? And did she have an opportunity to make any money? Or was the arrest so quickly after the release of the book that it became relatively moot?
Well, I don't think the book ever was going to make much money. I think she could. I think Dr. Ludwig nailed it on the head. To take the law enforcement, whatever, away from her and make her seem all the more the victim in this case and the more grieving spouse and whatever. It was exactly to make everyone think that she was in fact the victim, because this has always been about her. Even if you watch the way her antics are, hearings and everything that's gone on in the case, and she wants everything focused on her, and the book was just another way to do that.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, how about those 3 little boys? Dad's gone, mom is facing murder charges. How do they handle this? How do they deal with this for the rest of their lives?
Well, this will be a trauma wound that will impact them for the rest of their lives. We do know this. Hopefully they have supportive family around them who will get them the treatment that they need. But basically they lose 2 parents when this kind of scenario happens. They obviously lose a father, but they also lose a mother. And in their mind, they have a mother who is unsafe. And they may even feel endangered by her. They may feel like they're next. Who's next? What happens when mommy doesn't like somebody? Because they probably witnessed and saw a lot and know a lot more than we think they know.
Let me ask you, Greg, do we know how the kids are doing?
We know that they're doing very, very well. They're with Eric's family. They're being raised in the same community where they had been born and raised. They're doing well in school. They're staying out of this case as much as possible. The family's keeping, which I think is the best thing you can do. Obviously, they're going to get older, and they're going to suffer the loss of both parents at some point. It's going to be difficult for them, but right now they're young. None of them are even teenagers yet. But I think the great have quite a big family in that area in this part of the state, and they're taking care of those boys as though they're their own.
We've got a lot more to cover on this story. Coming up next, How bad was Kouri's financial situation?
In the months leading up to Eric's death, there are indicators of an increase of chaos and loss of control and larger amounts of money moving all around the account.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
We will not stop fighting. We have no quit.
Sean Diddy Combs arrested on a federal indictment.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon. Only on Court TV.
She owns several businesses, and the most relevant one to this case, I believe, is Kouri Richins Realty. I understand she flips homes, but she also acts as a realtor representing people who are purchasing homes. The debt payments that she made in December of 2021, there were 94 payments, and those 94 payments totaled $252,000.
You know, if you watch those shows like on HGTV where folks flip houses and it looks like, oh, wow, that's easy. It's not, and it's extremely risky. And Kouri Richins got into the house flipping business, and things started to get a little dicey in terms of the finances, because you have to purchase things, you've got to pay to fix them, and then you've got to sell them. And depending upon how many projects at a time you got going, the money flow can be pretty tight. That brings us to our next question in our investigation. How bad was Kouri's financial situation? She was running her business, her realty business, house flipping business, but there were some problems. But how bad was the situation? Still with me, Greg Skordas, and joining me, former homicide detective, host of the Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It's Chris McDonough with us. Chris, you know, when you talk about spousal cases, I've covered so many of them through the years at Court TV. When it comes down to motive, it's usually falls in three places. Custody, right? If there's something happening, could result in murder. Covered a bunch of those. Infidelity, you know, a third wheel, something like that, could be present here. And money. Money's a huge one. What are your thoughts here about how the financial situation plays into all that?
You know, and you're right on target, Vinny. I mean, money is always what we would call in homicide a pressure point, right? We're looking for, you know, something that would trigger this, you know, inappropriate behavior. And when you're in the construction business, i.e. you're flipping houses, there is a tremendous amount of pressure in relationship to subcontractors. You know, you have contracts with them. They're always going to be pushing your, you know, ringing your doorbell to say, hey, you owe me money. I did the work, you know, or you're going to have to advance the payment. So absolutely, money is always a pressure point.
Let's take a listen to Brooke Carrington, forensic accountant, Greg, talking about some of the things that were going on here.
I'm looking at, you know, what's happening in the business account, and does that influence what happens in the personal account, along with what is happening in the acquisition of properties and how those move together. And so there's this noteworthy crescendo that happens in the months leading up to Eric's death. There are indicators of an increase of chaos and loss of control and larger amounts of money moving all around the account.
In a positive way or a negative way?
It feels haphazard. There's not a pattern, there's not a practice that there had been a little bit earlier in my review. And there are transactions that don't clear when there's, you know, money is moving around just to cover transactions.
So let me ask you, Greg, how bad was Kouri's financial situation?
Well, the caring better than it actually was. Kouri was in bad shape, and she had gotten to the point, Vinnie, where she was engaging hard money lenders. And as you know, the interest rates that hard money lenders charge are great. I think that she was robbing Peter to pay Paul and assumed that there was this big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow once she was able to collect from Eric's life insurance and his business. But she wasn't good at flipping houses. She wasn't good at being a realtor. Business to the point where she got at the end, and I think that really was the overriding motive for what happened here.
Chris, let me show you this from the prosecutor's brief. On the day of Eric's death, the defendant owed over $3.1 million. She had recently defaulted on one loan and was struggling to avoid default on others. Her bank accounts were exhausted, and she was spiraling towards financial collapse. Regardless, she was 2 or 3 days away from closing on an additional $3.2 million in debt to purchase a partially completed property in Midway that would require millions of dollars to complete. Millions of dollars that the defendant apparently did not have. This is extreme stuff. Extreme stuff, and you know, I guess she fancied herself to be this real estate mogul, but it wasn't happening.
Yeah, and actually we would call that, this individual had a PhD, Vinnie, piled higher and deeper. And, you know, that is always, you know, problematic, and especially if there's also indicators in the relationship as a whole that it's causing stressors there. So you have two potential trains, you know, headed towards a collision here. And, you know, let's just hope that's not what, you know, happened, but it sure indicates that that's a high probability.
And Greg, just to review, I mean, Eric had an extremely successful business. He had a partner in this business.
Yes, and he had a buy-sell agreement with that partner. Upon his death, perhaps benefited Kouri greatly. And in fact, there was some manipulation in that agreement as well as his policies and whatnot toward the end of his life. Luckily, some of that, his family members were able to find some of that, and he was able to transactions aside. But with respect to his business partner, he did have a very successful business. In fact, that's how he met Kouri, ironically, because she was a Home Depot store, and he was a contractor buying goods there. And of course, they struck up a friendship that ultimately ended up a relationship and a marriage. But he was seen, I think, a very, very good source of income. And in fact, most of the virtually all of the money that she lost originally started with him.
Chris McDonough, take us inside the investigation. Like, when we think of investigations, usually homicide investigators, you know, you're looking for DNA, you're looking for fingerprints, you know, you're tracking things, you're getting digital evidence. What's it like, though, when you've got to dig through the finances of a couple, the finances of a somewhat complicated business? What is that like, and how do homicide investigators handle that?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple different roles that start to, you know, become abundantly clear are necessary. One is that forensic accountant. Vinnie, you want to bring them right to the table quickly. And then, of course, the next piece of that is you're going to have an immense amount of search warrants going out to all of the financial institutions, as well as, you know, car loans. And then, of course, the third step there is you're going to start interviewing everybody within inside of that circle, right? And you want to find out, look, you know, tell us about her business transactions. And you want to find both the positives and the negatives, because that can indicate, you know, past behavior is indicative of potential future behavior. And so those are kind of the steps that you would want to start taking.
And getting inside the mind of an accused killer, Chris, you know, you talk about what happened here, finances, but this crime has impacted her own children as well. Are you shocked, and maybe not because you're a homicide investigator, but shocked that a mother of young children would do this just for money.
Actually, I am, right? But of course, it doesn't shock us. I mean, you've been in the courtroom for many years, Vinnie, yourself. But what's shocking about this is the chameleon aspect of how these individuals mask their personalities. And so in one side of their life, they have this perfect projection in a public persona of everything's going great. However, on the other side of their life, i.e. their secret life, it's the train tracks have just broken and the train is just going in different directions. So
Coming up, will her lover be a star witness for the prosecution? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Eric Richens, a successful father of three who married a woman who had a failing house flipping business. When he died, investigators zeroed in on his wife, Kouri, for the murder. Here's the story. Kouri Richins was working at Home Depot when she met her husband, Eric. Eric owned an extremely successful company and was doing quite well financially. Eric and Kouri fell in love and started a family. They were raising 3 young boys when the marriage hit the rocks. There was tension over money connected to Kouri's struggling house flipping business and issues of infidelity. Things got so bad, Eric thought Kouri was trying to poison him. Eric died of fentanyl poisoning after drinking a Moscow Mule prepared by Kouri. Prosecutors say she laced the drink to get his money, but Kouri is claiming her innocence and may argue that Eric had a drug problem and OD'd. Either way, there are 3 boys without a dad and with a mom accused of murder. Now, prosecutors never have to prove motive in a case. You don't have to, but in a spousal case where there's children left without a parent, the jury wants to hear it, right? So we've been talking about the financial motive and financial problems of Kouri Richins, but there were other things going on, including some infidelity, a third wheel. She had a boyfriend, apparently. What I want to show you right now and let you listen to are some text messages from Kouri to her lover, and we're going to have them read by some of our producers here on the program. Take a listen to this series of text messages.
If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me tomorrow, would you? I just want to lay on the couch and cuddle you, watch a murder documentary and snuggle. I want you today, every day, not just sexually, but physically, mentally. Every day when I wake up, I do want a future together. I do want you. Figure life out together. If you could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. I love you. I have a crazy dream. You quit your job, I divorce and come up with millions and millions. We buy Midway and live in the guest house and rent out the huge house as a big event center. $15,000 a day like they charge down the road. Maybe $12,000 to stay competitive, and we will just run the event center as our daily job and hang out every day, raise some kids, have a little farm. Deal? To me, you're worth millions a year. I'm honored to be your friend, best friend actually, lover, go-to. Life is gonna be different, I promise. You're one hell of a patient person. I hate your hard days. I wish I could be there to turn them around for you. Can I try Friday? Give me a few days. Hang in there until then, please. Love you.
Those dates are important. That last text message was right before Eric died, like the day before he died, or he was found dead. She's texting her lover. That brings me to the next question in our investigation. Will her lover be a star witness for the prosecution? How about that? You know, there's motive and there's motive, and then this takes this case to a different place. Money, yeah. Now you're talking about sex as well. Still with us, representing the family of victim Eric Richens, Greg Skordas is with us. He's on the phone with us right now. And nationally known psychotherapist, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. All right, that was a little, whew. What were you hearing in those text messages, Dr. Robbie?
Well, Kouri felt she had found a new lover, and this is the life she really wanted to lead. And what we know about marital homicide is the person who kills their partner really views their partner as being in the way of the life that they want to live. And certainly Kouri's husband was in the way of the life she imagined she wanted to live. So I think we see it really clearly. And, you know, there's another added element here. Kouri had a mom whose romantic partner overdosed, and the mom benefited financially by getting the life insurance money. So Kouri has a model in her mind of the way her life can play out. And it sounds like she was very committed to her goals and the life she wanted to live.
Greg, I want to read this from one of the briefs filed by the state. On December 7th, 2021, 2 days before her paramour's birthday, and while Eric Richens was still alive, the defendant booked a 5-night all-inclusive trip, romantic accommodations at the Secrets St. Martin Resort and Spa for herself and her paramour. The defendant provided her paramour's initials and date of birth for the reservation. The trip was scheduled for April of 2022, the month after Eric Richens' death. Greg, what role do you think her lover will play in the trial? Will he be a star witness for the prosecution?
You know, they haven't really told us much about that, Vinny. I believe that he will be. I believe that he has come in line with the fact that what happened here and doesn't want to be a part of her mischief, a part of what she's done. And I think that he will tell the truth if he's called to testify, and I believe that the state will call him. But they haven't made that clear yet. They haven't disclosed. Well, they've listed him as a witness. Whether or not he's going to be one of their star witnesses or a big part of the case, we don't know yet. But certainly he's going to corroborate those text messages. He's going to corroborate their infidelity and what was going on there. It's interesting, those texts also include, as we talked about the last segment, Vinny, money, money, money. That this is all about money for her, and that's what Eric was for her, was just a source of money.
Yeah, I can't. I'm looking at these pictures, and I'm wondering, how could you take these pictures? How could you be there with these 3 wonderful little boys and engage in this type of conduct? Okay, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, the allegation of the state is that there was a prior attempt on Eric Richens' life. Let me read this to you. And the date of this is fascinating as well. On the morning of February 14th, 2022, the defendant purchased takeout food intended for her husband, Eric Richens, poisoned the food with illicit fentanyl that she procured 2 or 3 days earlier, and left the food and a Valentine note on the seat of Eric Richens' truck for him to eat for lunch. The defendant then departed Summit County to spend Valentine's Day with her paramour. Eric felt so sick that he drank a bottle of Benadryl, self-administered his son's EpiPen, and contemplated going to the hospital. Eric Richens went completely dark and slept for 2 hours. He awoke to the realization that, quote, "My wife tried to poison me." Dr. Robbie Ludwig, first of all, Valentine's Day. The allegation she tries to poison her husband, and then on Valentine's Day isn't going to miss a day with her paramour. What is this? Is getting darker and darker.
Well, we can analyze it that on Valentine's Day, her husband is getting in the in the way of her living this beautiful life, this wealthy life with a man she thinks she's in love with. And why Eric didn't leave then, it's kind of mind-boggling. Perhaps he was somewhat in denial or thought that she would not go through with it. But this is one dangerous woman. And poison historically was very common for women to use when they were in marriages that they wanted to get out of. It was easy. Women had access to the kitchen. And it sounds like for Kouri, this was her best bet. And ultimately, it sounds like allegedly she succeeded.
Greg Skordas, let me pick up on something Dr. Robbie was talking about here. Eric's reaction to being poisoned and realizing that his wife tried to poison him. What do we know about his mindset? Was he sharing any of this with his family? Why did he stay?
Well, I'll start with the last question. He stayed for 3 reasons, and those are the little boys that he was raising with Kouri. And he really felt that his role as a father was the most important role he could serve and didn't want to lose them to partial custody or joint custody or something like that. But he did tell his family, and he told his business partner, and he told others that he thought something was amiss, that he felt like she was trying to kill him. And he learned that she was manipulating their finances, changing his will, trying to change his buy-sell agreement with his business partner. So he knew, he could see the writing on the wall, Vinny. It's unfortunate that he didn't get out of the relationship sooner and just go ahead with the divorce. But Kouri recognized at the beginning that she would be far better off as a widow financially than she would be as a divorcee. And we think that that's part of the motive for what happened here.
And Dr. Robbie, following up on that, to me it speaks volumes about Eric Richens. You know, he could get divorced, and you know, but I want to be there every day with my kids.
Well, he also might have been concerned because some mothers kill their children too. You know, so he might have been concerned if she was out to kill him, if she had the kids, you know, who knows what she could do to them. And with this type of sociopath, anything is possible. So he might have felt like he needed to be in it in order to protect his kids because they were in danger too. And that also is a possibility.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, thank you so much for your help. Greg Skordas is going to stay with us. Still to come, was Kouri Richins inspired by her mom?
You know how much money the defendant got in insurance payouts?
$1.3 million.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan. Weeknights at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
This was a depraved game of chicken.
Driving the wrong way into oncoming traffic.
He basically kidnapped me. There was not a kidnapping.
The fake kidnapping murder trial. Trial coverage weekdays, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
1 or 2 pills might be accidental. 20 or 5 times the lethal dose is not accidental, Your Honor. That is someone who wants Eric dead. And the person who benefited the most from Eric being dead is the defendant.
Okay. Dr. Robbie mentioned something in the last segment, and I want to follow up on that. And it has to do with Kouri Richins and her mother, what happened to her mother and her mother's situation. This is from a search warrant affidavit. In investigating Kouri Richins' associates, it was discovered that in 2006, Richins' mother, Lisa Darden, was living with an adult female with whom she was having a romantic relationship. In April of that year, her romantic partner died unexpectedly. An autopsy report of the female partner showed that her immediate cause of death was drug poisoning from an overdose of oxycodone. Further investigation showed that Lisa Darden had been named as the beneficiary of her partner's estate a short time before her death. So you have a mother and daughter both in situations where their partners die unexpectedly from drug poisoning, and in both cases, both benefit financially. Brings me to the next question in our investigation. Was Kouri Richins inspired by her mom? And when I say that, I'm not accusing her mother of doing anything, but her situation ends up being similar to Kouri's situation, although prosecutors in Kouri's situation say she's the one creating the situation, or she is doing the poisoning. But she sees a poisoning from her mom's partner that results in her death and results in money going to her mom. We're back with Greg Skordas on the phone, and joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It's Chris McDonough. Chris, just as a general sort of thing here, when we look at people who commit homicides, you know, where do they get the ideas? There are some times where we look at cases and we're like, did they see that on Law and Order or something? In this case, it seems like a coincidence is almost a stretch. Like a mother and a daughter, both having significant others, accidentally die from drug poisoning?
Yeah, and what are the odds that it just happens to be opioid related, right, in nature? And so what the investigators have done here, based on the affidavit, is they went back and did what we would call pre-incident behaviorals. And they went and they found this exact type of problem. And what they do, Vinny, as you know, they overlay the details and the circumstances of the first case in 2006 with the situation that they're dealing with now, and see if there's any correlating behaviors. And it looks like they may have hit the jackpot.
Greg Skordas, let me ask you about Kouri Richins and what we know about her relationship with her mother and the relationship with her family.
She's very close with her mother, Vinny, and she's been writing to her mother while she's been in jail. I think, excuse me, last time we were here, we talked about that letter and that communication, and that's continued since she's been in jail. She's had regular communication, excuse me, with her mother.
Greg, take a moment, Greg, because I had the same thing happen to me during a commercial break. So just take a moment. I'll go back to Chris for just a second. Chris McDonough, so what do you do as an investigator? Like, her mother was never charged with anything. No one said that she committed any crime. Do you take a closer look at that as well? Or if it's in a different jurisdiction, do you give them a heads up to take a second look at it?
Both, Vinny. I mean, the first thing that you can do is obviously reach out to the ME's office and see if there's anything on file somewhere outside of just the paper toxicology report. You'd want to maybe see if they saved any tissue from the autopsy on that first victim, because then they could go back and look at, you know, different things that they didn't know, you know, at the time potentially. And then from there, you know, you push it forward with, you know, like we were talking about, overlaying the behavior. And there's correlating stuff. I mean, 2 months before the partner of mom passes away, she pulls, you know, the insurance information. And it's interesting that in this case, Kouri, 2 months, you know, in that note, she's talking about going on this vacation with her lover in those text messages and stuff. And so, you know, those are the kind of correlating behaviors that you'd want to look for.
All right, let's go back to Greg Skordas. Greg, tell us more about the relationship between Kouri Richins and her mother and her family.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Vinny, this hasn't been my night. First, my computer went down, and now my voice did. Kouri has a very, very close relationship with her mother, and she's been writing her constantly since she's been in jail. And I don't think it's anything, I don't think it could possibly be a coincidence that both of them, and I think Chris articulated this really well, suffered the death of their partner by an opioid overdose, and then shortly afterwards benefited from the life insurance from that. So Kouri's very close with her mother. They continue to maintain that close relationship, and the parallels between these two deaths are just astronomically coincidental.
So as we get ready for the trial, Greg, do you expect her family to play a role, being called by either side as witnesses in any of this?
I think Kouri's family will be called, probably to talk about, her relationship with Eric, that she loved him very much, that she was close with him, that she would have never done anything to hurt him. I know that Kouri wrote her brother a letter. We talked about that last time we were here, the walk the dog letter, where she basically told him what to say in terms of Eric's behavior, whether or not that's going to fly or whether or not the brother is going to take the bait and testify according to that letter remains to be seen. But yeah, I have no doubt that Kouri's family is going to testify and try to paint her as a very sympathetic victim here and a widow of a tragic event.
And Chris, how would you rate this as in terms of an investigation, but how difficult of a case this was because of the nature of the defendant, the victim, and the suspect, and just the nature of the death?
I'd say it's a high 8 because, she had that chameleon persona, writing the book, going on public, etc. So they really had to dig deep and, get in the weeds here behind the scenes, Vinnie.
And Greg, before we run out of time, the family, are they prepared to go through all of this?
Oh yeah, they've been prepared since the homicide took place, Vinnie. They've been patient. They've been working with the Summit County Attorney's Office, with the Summit County Police Department or Sheriff's Office, and they know that this is not something that's going to be resolved here in the next few weeks or months. But they also realize that the investigation was done well. The evidence is there, it's compelling, and they feel like this is the kind of case that once a jury hears it, that the truth will come out.
Greg Skordas, Chris McDonough, thank you so much for helping us out tonight. Really do appreciate it. Now, there were obviously some strange circumstances inside the Richens home, but regardless of the tension connected to money or infidelity, Eric and Kouri were parents, and those 3 little boys deserved better. If the allegations here are true, Kouri forever altered 4 lives with just 1 Moscow mule. And that's a crime that only a very selfish person would commit. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.